Hello, I'm Ian Christie. I'm Vice Chair of the Foundation for Democracy and Sustainable Development, and here we are in the South London Botanical Institute, which is where we're holding our annual retreat, one of our general meetings. This is a place where children, especially from the surrounding area, can come to learn about the natural world and, we hope, get a sense of how it's going to affect their futures. And this is highly relevant to the discussions we've been having about how the Foundation can influence thinking for the long term in the UK and beyond about how sustainable development interacts with democracy, interacts with the issue of the rights and responsibilities that we have towards future generations. Now, on that front, there's a lot of anxiety at the moment in the UK because the new government that we've got has decided to wind up the Sustainable Development Commission, which was the body which oversaw the direction of sustainable development thinking and strategy in the UK. And the government has reassured everyone that it's going to take its functions into different parts of government, but nonetheless there's still a lot of anxiety about whether that change in policy means that we're going to lose some of our institutional capacity for thinking about the long term. And that brings us to our new trustee, Professor János Zlinsky, who we're delighted to welcome to the Foundation. And János has an incredibly relevant background in relation to all these discussions because he's not only an advisor to the President of Hungary on environmental issues, but he's also a colleague of our friend Sándor from the Parliamentary Commission for the Environment and Future Generations in Hungary. So it's a hugely relevant background that you bring to the Foundation, János, and I just wonder if you can say something about the work of the Office for Future Generations and the Environment and how you think it's affected the discussion in Hungary about the rights of future generations and how that fits in with democracy.
By the way, we perceive the whole fact that this Ombudsman's office has been created, the Ombudsman for Future Generation, is in a way a wisdom and admitting on behalf of politics that in the past 20 years of democratic Hungary there was not enough attention paid to long-term issues, to really long-term issues. And therefore, the Hungarian political parties have changed the law on Hungarian ombudsman and created this position for future generations with a very big power on environmental enforcement, on being a watchdog for environmental enforcement, but also on legislation which might impact on long-term sustainability. So we have the power both to intervene if the authorities are not adhering to environmental law, or indeed if business is not following environmental law, but also we can make our voices heard in any legislation or even investments which might on the long run prove unsustainable. So I think basically any country would do well to create one way or the other an independent body of some kind that can take this burden to be a watchdog in an unusually long perspective, because presently our democratic societies are not geared usually towards that. Science is, but science has no direct link to everyday politics and certainly not to democratic constituencies.
Sure. Now I mentioned our friend Dr. Sándor, who runs the Office of Parliamentary Commissioner for Future Generations and the Environment in Hungary, came over to the UK earlier this year, and we had a very well attended seminar where he explained the work of the Parliamentary Commissioner, and a lot of interest was aroused in the possibilities of this kind of office. And have you found that other countries in the EU have been interested in this experiment that's taking place in Hungary?
Well, the European Parliament has, not long after we have been set up. We had, at the invitation of several parties in the European Union, a half-a-day symposium on the possibilities of having such an ombudsman for future generations at the European level. And this is something the new European Parliament is likely to pick up and propose to the Commission to at least discuss the issue.
One of the criticisms that's often aimed at modern democracy is that it's very short-termist. Everyone is focused on 4 years, 2 years, the short-term economic cycles. Do you think that the existence of this new institution in Hungary has increased public awareness and debate about the distant future and future generations?
Well, what we can say probably is at least it increased the awareness of governance, government, and even the city governments and also the parliament. That's a good start, I think. We've been involved in very interesting programs such as creating a new curriculum for civil service education. So the compulsory examinations anyone in the civil service has to pass have now sustainable development modules. In the future there will be no civil servants in Hungary incoming in the civil service who will not have ever heard about sustainable development in the essence. So I think things like that are big steps forward, and of course we still have a huge task to reach the public at large.
Yes. Do you think that all of the parties in Hungary are behind you? Is this an initiative that is going to survive changes in government in the future?
Well, we do hope so, because it was an all-party consensus that agreed on this change to be put forward, and it was an all-party committee. There were at that time 5 parties in parliament, and 1 MP from each party joined this group proposing the amendment which created the Ombudsman for Future Generations. And we can say, based on the reception of our first report, which summarized our work until now, that it was again an all-party consensus that this was indeed a good idea, and that the work which we tried to bring forward and the changes we tried to advocate were actually useful for Parliament. So we had a very warm reception in Parliament, and this was already under the new government, so the new Parliament. Actually, it's bridging. It's very interesting because the first hearing was with the old Parliament, and the next one with the present one. So I think we can keep this good relationship, this I would say constructive relationship with the Parliament and this independent watchdog.
Okay, that's very encouraging. Now, bearing in mind the experience that you've had, what recommendations would you give to organisations in this country who might be interested in exploring the possibilities of setting up a similar office? What would your tips be for the way which we should approach this?
I think anyone would have to be very clear about what the new office should be about. There are so many possibilities on how to care for a presence of future generations in the public discourse, and we have to be clear, or you would have to be clear, whether it is about a committee, it is about a more like a figurehead type of organization like an ombudsman. Should it be in the judiciary? There are many democratic solutions. One has to choose in the national context an optimal one. Then there has to be not just political, but I would say first and foremost a professional discussion about the feasibility. It has to be tested in a wider professional community whether the idea would fly in that political context. And then it's useful to make the public understand how it would work. If it can be demonstrated, that's very useful. If not, then it can be at least discussed. And I should suggest that it is at that point where the political could come in. That political decision makers, i.e. Parliament ultimately, would have to be made familiar with the issue, and the parliamentary lobbying could start at this point, and then it would have a good chance to fly.
Okay, that's great. Well, thank you very much indeed. Great to have you on board. Welcome to the
Thanks
Foundation.
very much.
There's a lot more on the Foundation's website about the experiment in Hungary and about the issue of future generations, and we'll be returning to this in future projects of the Foundation. Thank you ever so much, János, and welcome to the Foundation. Thank you.